Welcome everyone back. I'm excited. I want to thank Aldo and Steve, our guests today, because they're kind of the ones that inspired me to kick things off because they host their own podcast. I just forgot how fun it was. And when I got to be a guest on their podcast, I was like, I have to do this right now again. And what better way to open up the episode one more time by having Aldo Mena and Steve Cianez with us today as guests. So thank you so much, first of all, both of you, for accepting the invite. I'm excited to get this going, talk to you guys. We got a lot of really interesting things that we want to discuss. But before I get right into it, I would like to maybe allow you guys to tell our listeners, or if you're watching this on YouTube too, a little bit about yourself. So if it's okay, we can start with Aldo.
First of all, thank you for inviting us on your show, Julie. And once again, thank you for being on ours at one point. Hopefully we can do that again soon. You are great. And I'm so happy to hear that you're starting this project up again. I guess just a couple of quick things about, Vanguard Elements, the podcast you featured on. We started it 3 weeks after the Walmart shooting in 2019. And it was one of those projects that was just sitting around, and in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get this going at some point. That happened, and I realized, you know what? I'm not going to procrastinate anymore. I'm going to rush this into production. And 3 weeks later, we produced our first podcast episode.
And you, Steve, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself also, and then how did you end up collaborating with Aldo for the podcast?
Julie, first of all, very grateful for this opportunity to be on your podcast. Thank you very much. And yes, it was a blast to have you on our podcast, so that was fun. I think we explored some very interesting topics, and we kind of dove deep, right? We dove deep in some of the topics that we were talking about. So, yeah, I think we had a lot of fun. We learned a lot, and then hopefully our listeners also learned something, right? They picked up something and put it into practice. I wasn't there when Mena started the podcast. I didn't help him on the first episode. I joined later. I've known Mena. I call him Mena, Aldo. I've known him for, 20, 30 years already. We used to teach at the same school.
Yeah.
We were both teachers.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was fun. And we've always had, interest in coming up with, creating stories. At that time, I remember back when we were teachers, we bought these digital cameras, and we were thinking about producing documentaries. And so, it's always been, our passion of ours to create, write stories, and then share them with, everyone. And hopefully with the intent that people will engage, will learn something, right? And if not, at least we can spark some type of, conversation, and then hopefully land somewhere where, there's positive change for all of us, right? So, yeah, I'm right now in California. I'm talking to you guys from Sacramento, California. I work with an organization called Unidos US, formerly known as the National Council for La Raza. We are the largest Latino civil rights organization. I do, as a disclaimer, I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm speaking on behalf of Steve Cianez tonight, right? But, just to let listeners know what I do with my spare time. Very grateful for that opportunity to really push for policy. That's why I'm in Sacramento, here at the capital of California, the state where things are happening and happening very fast. And I think we are a state that prides itself on being the leader in the resistance, right? In the resistance movement. And oh my God, have things gotten kind of out of hand, as we all know. Yeah, we'll talk about it tonight. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I was just going to add something real quick. I'm sorry, to what Steve said. I kind of credit Steve as sort of one of the intellectual co-founders of our podcast, because I don't know if he remembers, but years and years ago, we were doing something. This is before podcasting really took off. We did something very similar to this. Life intervened. So way back, in addition to, trying to do, filming things and whatever, we also kind of did some prototypes of the podcast. So I kind of consider him sort of an intellectual co-founder of the podcast.
Speaking of stories, I'm going to jump right into this. Like Steve said, so much has been happening. Every day, it's like one or a million and one things that happen and that we're hearing about on the news. And some are really ridiculous. Some are scary. Some are a combination of both ridiculous and scary at the same time. But I wanna focus on kind of like more recent news, I guess, that impacted our community, the Mexican and Mexican American community more so. But before we get to that, I did ask Aldo and Steve, when I asked them to be guests and they accepted, I asked if they would watch the documentary that's kind of trending right now on Netflix, and it's called Inside the Manosphere. I think a lot of what was exposed or that we saw is not necessarily new, but it's definitely being branded and packaged in a very dangerous way. It basically presents male influencers that are extremely popular. They present their content as teaching men, specifically young men, to take care of themselves, to be fit, to be financially stable, and like ways that you can make money. That's kind of what they package it as, right? But when you start to listen to some of the things that they actually are sharing, they're quite dangerous. I was horrified and so pissed off as I was watching so much of this. But I kind of want to hear what your thoughts were as you were watching the documentary yourselves.
Well, at first I was just sort of half watching, and I guess the documentary is called Inside the Manosphere, and I guess it was produced by somebody named Louis Theroux, this undercover journalist. So, I was kind of half watching, half paying attention on my laptop, but after a while, I was like, I couldn't ignore it. I was like looking at this, and my initial reaction was outrage, okay? Because these guys, they promote these very rigid gender hierarchies that are just, I don't even know if the word offensive, even covers it. I mean, this is alarming. These are alarming gender hierarchies. And I was just struck by the contempt, obviously contempt for feminism, but I didn't really see them engaging with any feminist ideology or anything like that, but a contempt for women that I have just never encountered in my life. And, I've heard of the manosphere. In passing, I've heard of a lot of these figures. Never really took too much time to look into them. I just, whatever. But after watching it, I was just alarmed. I guess I left, finished watching and was just thinking, this is alarming. It'd be funny because they are kind of ridiculous too. Just a bunch of bros and like frat boy types, and they're into this hyper masculinity. But then you see them interact with women, and then you hear them discuss women, and you're just, I'm disgusted with what they're saying. And then you move from outrage to anger. I mean, it's like, this is really alarming. And I know in the film, Andrew Tate did not actually, I think there were a few passing references to Andrew Tate. He's one of the more prominent figures in this, the manosphere or whatever. But you could feel his presence in the positions and attitudes being espoused by these guys, which is just a total contempt for women. The way they would bring them on. In one case, there was this, I guess his name, he goes by the name of Myron Gaines. His real name is Amru Fudel or something like that. He brings these women onto his podcast and then humiliates them. And it was just
could have reached through the screen.
No, it was stunning. It was alarming. I was outraged. The scary thing for me, okay, you see these idiots and mostly what you see are a bunch of most of their fans are these young boys, right? They're in Marbella, Spain, and there's a lot of, European tourists walking around and stuff like that. And it's a bunch of teenage boys running up to them and getting selfies. And you're thinking, okay, whatever, this is ridiculous. Okay, so what if they have all these followers? But another alarming aspect is that there's a political aspect to their activity. They are all invariably Trump supporters. And one of the guys, I guess, Justin Waller, the guy from Louisiana, has been to Mar-a-Lago. They're all big on Trump. And what you see is, okay, here they are. They've got these attitudes, and one of the tangible realities of the situation is that, guess what? This is all getting beamed out to all these impressionable young men. And what's the next thing they're going to do? They're going to run out and support Trump. But
yeah, and they are extremely supportive of Trump and, of course, now this administration. And they are extremely invested in political connections because obviously I'm sure they're seeking some type of benefit to that. And this is just me from the outside looking in, obviously a woman. I don't know what it's like to grow up as a man in this society, in today's world. But I'm assuming that a lot of these guys are just seeking guidance, right? They're lost. They want to be successful. They want to be able to have the nice house, feel like they are respected and admired. And so they're going to follow this shiny package of a message that's being presented to them in a way that's like, it's not true. Because I also feel like the more I kept listening to them, the more that I was realizing, like, what actually are you selling? Like, yeah, you're yelling and you're screaming out a lot of things like, do this and do that, and women are this and women are that. And I think at some point, some of the followers said to a young man that they met on the beach, said, men are born without value, so we had to fight harder. And I'm like, they're telling you that you don't have value as a human, and that already is wrong. Like, we're all valuable, right? And so the fact that they're so easily buying into this is very scary, and it's very sad because, again, they are just seeking guidance. They're seeking to feel secure, and they're seeking to feel like they have something to offer that people are going to accept and look at them with a lot of respect, right?
This over-the-top, toxic masculinity, but a feature of this toxic masculinity is just this contempt for women.
That was very confusing to me because I also feel like, how are these influencers and these quote unquote role models to young men able to convince them that women are almost like evil, right? And that they have no good intentions with them? Because I'm like, I doubt that they have so much experience with women that's negative. One thing I also noticed was that a lot of these guys don't have either a father figure growing up, or they have very turbulent, family dynamics. And the reason I bring this up, because I'm not trying to shame anybody for not having a father figure, right? Or like a good one, even if they were present, but they weren't great fathers. The reason I bring this up is because a lot of men that buy into this toxic message actually criticize women and insult them for having what they call daddy issues. And I thought it was really funny in a kind of sad way that the very thing they're using as a weapon to criticize and insult women is the very thing that's happening with them. They're also coming from really troubled childhoods, maybe not the best relationship with a father figure. And I just found that really interesting.
Well, and I guess, my take on this documentary, am I surprised? No. I think, these guys are all victims, if we can get away with this, to say they're all victims of the current system that we have, which is, beyond capitalism, because you can't get away when you start criticizing capitalism, because then they tag you as something else. But consumerism, though, I think is something for us kind of, we could target consumerism. And I think we're all victims of that to a certain degree, right? I mean, these guys are they're selling something. That's what they're doing. I mean, they're selling themselves, right? They are selling muscles. They are selling, nice homes. They are selling nice cars. Good-looking dudes making a lot of money and who get all the women, right? And if you're a teenager, well, that's your dream, right? It's like, oh yeah, well, and then plus they basically say you don't have to go to school for all this, right? It's like it's all good. You just have to look good in front of a camera and like me have some muscles and hang out with the chicks and you get all the girls, right? And that's kind of like the message. And the thing is, people fall for this message, right? Because it's a story that they make up, right? We're talking about stories. They touch someone's emotions, and I bet you the followers are mostly kids, right? I don't think most adults actually, waste their time watching these guys.
You actually would be surprised. I do think that younger men tend to be more attracted to this. I think that it's an organized also tactic on their behalf to be able to reach younger guys because they're probably going to be the ones that are going to buy into it a lot easier. I actually have had conversations with men damn near almost 40 who buy into this.
I think again, they play on consumerism. They play on the flashiness of everything. And you're foolish. You're going to believe that. You're going to think that's the way to go. And I need to follow these guys. And then on top of that, they're going to say, well, if you really want to know the secret, I'm going to charge you for a membership fee, right? And then they make more money on you, and then you just keep on paying and paying and paying. It's a narrative that we are too familiar with. I mean, if you're paying attention to what's going on in right now in the world, right, with Trump, right? I mean, when he takes the mic and he talks about Iran, and he talks about a deadline, and he talks about I can fix this problem. They're lying. I mean, it's the same. It's the same freaking story, the same narrative, right? And some people want to believe it. Why? Because sometimes. And this is the truth. We are all part of this system, right? It's like a rat race, and we're all willing runners. We all want to run because we know that whoever ends up right with the most toys in this life wins, right? I mean, that's the race. You get the toy and then you win, right? And then if we speak differently, if I say, well, no, that's not really. You should be pursuing happiness. You should be pursuing, social justice. We should be working together to eliminate inequity and lack of access to college and lack to access to housing. So if I start saying that to those guys, to that group of people, you know what they're going to hear? They're going to hear unbearable nonsense. That's what they're going to hear. They're going to say, what is this guy? They're just going to tune me out and like, whatever. These guys know what they're talking about because they got all the chicks and you don't, right? And that's what it is, unfortunately. But it's the system that's created these kids. And it's the system that's created these type of, crazies out there. These, I don't even want to call them machos, but yeah, in a way they're, the machos, in a very bad sense of the word. But they're taking advantage of it, right? Just like Trump is taking advantage of all those people that want to believe that if you voted for him, you're going to become rich because he's rich. There's people who desire that, and that's their unique desire, right? Only desire too.
Yeah, and but it's so crazy because like again, yes, to go to what you were saying, Trump and a lot of the men in this administration seem to think that they kind of have to like present themselves fluffing their feathers and talking about fight and war and you have to be super manly and go out and attack because that's the only way that you gain respect. But that to me, all it tells me is that these are people that have, maybe they victimize themselves. Maybe they feel like they have been pushed to the side and they have created this complex, right? That now it's like, I'm going to show you who's the real man. And really, I think that the thing that a lot of these men and maybe some other people, because when I was watching the documentary too, I was extremely saddened by the young women on there who are extremely aware of what they're doing. And I know that in their minds, they're saying, I know what they are. I'm not going to let it affect me because I'm doing my thing and I'm also kind of like making my way, right? I'm making my way. I'm earning my money. I'm getting the likes and the views or whatever. But I was really sad by that because I'm like, you guys, we sometimes as women are the reason that this patriarchal system is sustained. We think, oh, I'm not going to let it affect me. I know how they are. You're not telling me something that I don't know. I realize that they're toxic. I realize that they're crazy, but I'm going to take advantage of that, right? We see it within the administration. You saw some of the women that have lied and kept things from the public, hoping that this loyalty would gain them something. And in the end, they're the first ones to go out, right? You've seen it with Pam Bondi. You've seen it with, what's her name? Kristi Noem, right? I think pretty soon the press secretary is going to be out. These are smart women because in order to get to where they are, they had to have made moves, right? And it's like you're aligning yourself with a system, a group of men who still will discard you the moment that they get the chance to do that.
Other feature of the discourse that these influencers kind of peddle, and it was common, I think, with all of them, is anti-Semitism. I noticed that each and every one of them, each of these influencers, they promote anti-Semitic narratives, and they're vile anti-Semitic narratives. And to sort of bring this home, I mean, you think it's harmless, ridiculous stuff, frat boy stuff, but it's very serious. And we kind of to sort of, you guys have heard of Brandon Herrera. I've been talking about him a lot lately. He's running for Congressional District 23. He became the presumptive nominee when Tony Gonzalez dropped. Tony Gonzalez dropped out, right? And so it's like one of those things that he's also has some very vile anti-Semitic videos and other things that he has that he's produced, and a lot of people, like especially a lot of Democrats, when Tony Gonzalez, who had to drop out, the incumbent for CD23, had to drop out because of the scandal involving his one of his congressional aides, a lot of Democrats celebrated the fact that now Katie Padilla Stout would be running against Brandon Herrera, right? And they were pointing to his, his sympathy for the Confederacy. He did this video for a Confederate heritage group. And then these other videos, and I'm just going to describe a couple of these videos just to give you guys an idea. In one video, Herrera can be seen goose stepping, okay, to this this battle hymn favored by the Nazis, okay? And there's this other guy in the video with him, just to kind of give you guys a flavor of the types of videos he produces. And there's this other guy, he's wearing a mask, and they're firing an MP40, which is the weapon of choice of Nazis. And then at one point, Brandon Herrera goes, "This is the original ghetto blaster." So he's referring to, the Warsaw ghettos and things, the Jewish ghettos or whatever. At one point, the Brandon Herrera's the buddy, the guy who's with him, is about to perform a Nazi salute. Brandon Herrera stops him, gestures to the camera, and they both give this knowing look like, "Oh yeah, we can't do this on camera." But I mean, if I did this, I'd be fired. If Steve, we'd be fired and ostracized. In another video, Herrera and this same masked guy, this masked man, who's affecting a German accent, they start shooting up cases of White Claws, which is like a beverage, right? And at one point, I guess the White Claws are being used to represent Jewish people. So it's like a Gestapo joke. So many things that, under normal circumstances, in saner times, would have rendered Brandon Herrera unelectable. Yeah, he would have been unelectable. Okay. But in this case, in the current environment, the environment that props up people like these influencers, these toxic male influencers, this might work to his advantage. Now he's in a different space. He's sort of one of the leading exponents of gun culture 2.0. So it's all about guns. So they're going to get them either way. They're going to get a lot of these young people with either gun culture or this toxic masculinity. And it's something that needs to be taken seriously by everybody. And, I just hope that the Democrats realize that these types of displays in this environment, it's not the albatross that they think these displays are. They think, oh, we're just going to point to these things and that's it. People are going to not vote for them. I don't know.
Things are definitely changing. Like you said, people are not facing consequences. A lot is being allowed.
Yep.
And I think that Democrats we saw it in the last election, they failed because they had that mentality.
Yes.
They had that mentality that a lot of people were going to see these things that were outrageous and that they were going to say, oh, I'm not going to vote for these people because of my values, right? Of being a decent human being. That didn't work. And I think that they have to keep pressing. I get really frustrated when I see a lot of the Democrats in Congress and Senate. Like, I feel, and again, I've never been in a position like that, so I don't know what it's actually like. But it is frustrating looking at it as someone, out here, that a lot of our representatives are not pushing, they're not pressing, they're not sticking to constantly showing people like we're gonna fight, even if they want to get away with it, and that the other side of the aisle allows it and they celebrate it. We are not gonna do that. We're not gonna go with it, and I really hope that things change because it feels like it's not.
Yeah, no, I mean, gosh, no. I mean, it's frustrating because there's just no fight in them, and read the room. We need people who are going to engage on these things. And I just hope that they're not just writing off CD23 as something, Tony Gonzalez is gone. We've got this.
Yeah.
You don't.
No,
this is Texas, ladies and gentlemen. This stuff will resonate with a lot of people.
It will.
The thing is, a lot of this, this online clout can translate to political traction. And we need to proceed with caution. Yeah.
I mean, you have Joe Rogan, right, who has this massive, huge platform with his podcast.
Yes.
And while I know that he has sort of taken a lot of those things back and now seems regretful of having, perhaps allowed some of this to be shared on his podcast and kind of pushed it out, he was a big influence in getting so many men specifically to listen to some of the things that he was endorsing and just being convinced. And here's the thing. I think we live now in a world where if you have an online personality and enough people that like you, you don't even have to be factual. You don't have to even do much research. You just have to deliver something that sounds good and resonates with someone. And because they like your online personality, they're going to follow whatever you do. That's just the world we live in today.
Yes.
And we saw it happen, I think, with this election. And we're seeing it happen with, you saw it with the documentary, like some of the things that were being shared. And the really young kids, I think there was a kid that looked to be maybe 7 or 8 at the time that he went up to one of them and took a picture. Like, this is getting delivered right to the hands of like really, really young boys. And so I'm interested. Again, I don't think that this is something that's new per se. I think that we have, like I said, it's been rebranded, repackaged, right? It looks shinier and better, I guess. And it's reaching so many people because of social media. But I don't think it's new. And so I'm curious, and I'm going to start with you, Steve, if that's okay. If anything that you saw there remotely sounded like something that you may have heard, witnessed, anything like that growing up as a young Mexican American, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, again, and I'm just going to go back to this idea for me, and I'm looking at this through that lens of consumerism. Mexican Americans are no exception. We're part of that world too, right? I mean, we're all looking for a better life, right? We're all looking for to have more money, right? To travel. As a young guy, as a teenager, there was always this idea of, you want to go out with the girl that's, the most beautiful, the most good looking, right? And for me, because I grew up, so I was living on both sides of the border. So when I was, let's see, 11 years old, we moved to Chihuahua, Mexico, which, is 4 hours south of El Paso. And I lived there till I was 18 and then moved back to the States. But I was going back and forth from Mexico to the United States. And there's a lot of similarities between how, kids in Mexico that go to la secundaria, which is middle school, or high school, bachilleres, how we act and how we think about women, it very much was the same in California, right? Hanging out the summers, same kids, different countries, different states, same age, but very similar in the way we thought about girls, and we thought about women. The kids, the boys, right? And one thing was, you wanted to be the hot shot. You wanted to be the one who had not only one girlfriend, but you had two or three, right? And you were like, oh yeah, he's that's the type of guy you want to be, right? It was this machismo, this idea of machismo. So I saw that, right? I mean, that's clearly what they're trying to sell you, right? It's like you want to be the stud, right? And I think and the reason I think that sells so well, and again, I'm going back to this, it's they're branding it, they're trying to sell this, is because it's part of who we are as human beings. One of the we're wired as human beings to reproduce, right? That's we can't get away from that. That's already wired in our genes. You come to this world to reproduce, right? Nature wants you to reproduce. Maybe after you get educated and you learn and you start looking at life differently, you understand that you're not just an animal, right? That you're a human being, you
Right,
have
that there is
feelings, you have values,
self-control.
and those are the things that stop you, right, from doing all these crazy things, right? Remember that song? Who used to sing that song? You and I, baby, are only what? We're just mammals, and let's do it like they do it on the Discovery Channel. Remember that
Oh
song?
yeah,
And you and
Bloodhound
you,
Gang or
baby.
something like that.
They're just
I
speaking
know the
to the
song. Yes,
nature
I
of
think
who
it's
we
the
are, right?
Bloodhound
Like we're
Gang.
just
No, it's
mammals,
the
and let's do it
'90s.
like they do it on the Discovery Channel,
Ob-
right?
Forever.
Remember that song?
Obscure '90s reference. Yes, I do. That's a cool song.
But right,
At the
right. That's a
time
good
in the
song in a
'90s,
sense.
it was cool. Yeah, yeah.
It was a hit, right? It was everywhere. But the guy was being sincere. He just touched on the point that, I think that's where our nature. That's our nature, but it doesn't mean just because it's our nature we're going to go out there and go out with many. We're going to have many partners, right? Just to not only for guys but also for gals, right? But I think as a Mexican American, though, I think you are allowed to explore that side as a man versus a woman, right? As a guy, it was
Oh yeah.
okay if you went out and you had several girlfriends, but as a gal, no, you're just supposed to stay home. You're here at 10 o'clock at night. Because this happened when I saw this with my cousins, right? We were out there partying till like 4 o'clock in the morning. They had to be home at 9 or 10, right? And then we were like in charge of taking care of them too. Stuff like that. It was the hypocrisy was crazy. But at the same time, what's interesting is no guy in Chihuahua, at least in Chihuahua, right? And I think it's everywhere, right? No guy wanted to end up with a girl that was a slut, right? Who went out and hanged out with all the guys. Really, that you want to hang out with her, you want to take advantage of her, but do you want to marry her? Do you
But
want to
not
have a relationship
consider a
with her?
commitment.
Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy, right? And so you grow up. It's not like you're being taught what's right or wrong. You get some of that in. For me, it was in the family. It was growing up. It was church. Stuff like that. What was taught in the streets and with your friends, none of that came close, right? I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff in that documentary Manosphere. they speak the truth. We might not like it, but I think they speak the truth about, most young men in the world, right? Because
Yeah.
that's who we are. We're wired to think like that, to act like that. But again, I think the difference though is you have to be cognizant that you're not an animal and that you shouldn't be doing it like they do it on the Discovery Channel, right? Just to joke around with that again. You have a mind. You're critical. You're reasonable. You look at things. You think about things. You measure things, pros and cons, and then you're driven by values. What's important in life.
Yeah.
But those things
Yeah.
sometimes they just get thrown to the side thanks to shining things like get rich and have be the man and have a lot of girlfriends. So yeah, so I mean, I
Right.
I saw that a lot of that stuff.
Didn't have brothers, but I was the oldest of four. So let me tell you, being the oldest of in a Mexican family as a woman was not fun. It was not fun because
Mm,
my dad, for instance, since he was very young, we know because we hear the stories, he was out drinking, like you
mm,
said, till like the middle of the night, but then God forbid that I even had a male friend, right? Because then
mm-hmm.
that was a so the hypocrisy of like women cannot have, male friends and everybody looks at it like, oh, well, something has to be going on because there's just no way that men and women can be friends, which I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Or also like the whole slut shaming, right? Like, God forbid that a woman enjoys her sexuality and that just like you also has interest and that she has a history
Mm-hmm.
before she meets you, right? Especially, I
Mm-hmm.
find it even way more ridiculous, like when I find that older people that are like dating, maybe they're single and they're wanting to date, and all of a sudden the older man is upset that this woman he's interested in has had partners in the past, right? Or that she's dated and she has an actual past. And I'm just like, dude, where are you even living? Like, she's a human being too, which is why a lot of times the feminist movement is considered to be it's casted in a really negative way, right? Especially with men who still have that mentality and are teaching other boys to have that same mentality because it's like, oh, they're all sluts. Feminists are all sluts, which is so far away from the truth, right? But that's the easiest way to like degrade someone and look at them as less than
Oh,
human, right? Like, oh, they're sluts, they don't know what they want. They're just dramatic and they're hysterical and, all these awful things. So, yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy, I think,
yeah, oh,
in our community.
yeah.
And then Aldo, I don't know if maybe some of that also resonated with you with what Steve just shared.
Oh yeah, I mean I've seen it. I've been adjacent to it. Thankfully my father, even though he was from West San Antonio, I never saw it with my father really, but
Oh,
I was
good.
aware of it in other instances, and it's obviously probably not as sort of blatant as what you see in what you saw in the documentary. I mean, this is what these guys they'd come out and say things that were pretty outrageous, but you
Mhm.
saw a version of that same thinking where it's okay. Like I think at one point in the documentary, they're talking about one-sided monogamy for the
For the
guy,
men.
for the
Oh,
men.
no, for the woman. The woman.
Maybe you can see where something like that is can be is apparent even in the Mexican American or Mexican community. There's also this mindset that, and I think that this came out in the documentary as well, where the woman's place is at home, taking care. I think at one point, one of the influencers, let's see, what was his name? He was the one guy from Louisiana, is it Justin Waller?
Yeah.
Him and his wife, I guess they had moved back. They're from Miami. They'd moved back to Baton Rouge or whatever. And they both talked about lanes where his lane
The
is to
gender
go out
roles,
and do
right?
certain things. And she didn't want to know what other stuff he was involved in. And her lane was to stay home and take care of the kids and take care of the home and stuff like that. So there's a version of that floating around the Mexican or Mexican American community as well. So
Yeah, especially like I think in
No,
the older
yeah,
generation.
oh yeah,
yeah. So I'm gonna tell my story, right? I remember my uncle, my dad's brother, Tío Neto. That's what we call him, Tío Neto, right? Neto Ernesto. And he used to say this in Spanish. He used to tell me, he goes, "No sea pendejo, hijo. Digo, nunca dejes a que tu esposa trabaje, porque la que no cae tropieza." And I'm like, okay, right? I mean, it was basically keep your woman, once you marry, you keep her at home and she bears children and she takes care
Hmm.
of the family and she takes care of you, right? And I like, I
Right.
mean, that didn't really resonate with me, but I said, well, okay. But that's how he thought. That I mean, in his world, he was, he brings in, he's the breadwinner. He brings in, the food. He puts food on the table, and the woman's there to take care of him and the kids. That's their role. Now,
And
whatever
not
he does
question
with his
him.
extra time and money, that you don't question that, right? You don't question that, right?
Right.
And but it always resulted in I mean, I remember going over sometimes, and mi tia Rosa, that was his wife, would always be yelling at him in the beginning into big old fights, because obviously it was over money and it was over he didn't show up and he went somewhere and he's like, no, I was working and blah blah. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. But but
Yeah,
we
right.
know those type of stories. Yeah,
Who are you working
yeah,
yeah.
with?
yeah, yeah.
As I was watching this, when I watched the documentary, the Inside the Manosphere, the news had just broken out about something that may appear like worlds away, but I found some connections, right? The news of these allegations about Cesar Chavez, which of
Yeah.
course he is, was up until recent, a very important figure in the Mexican American community, right? Because he did a lot of work for farm workers, right? For them to have like to get better paid and protections and things of that sort. And so his work was very important, right? And so it was very painful, I think, for the Mexican community to learn these things. And then we also, because there were several people that came forward and shared their story about how he abused them, right? Assaulted them sexually. Some women talk about even rape. And so very harsh allegations. And a lot of people were upset because they said, he's already dead. We're not going to talk about him, right? Which, I mean, to each their own, but I'm like, these women are still living with this awful, experience that they have in the back of their minds. They're allowed to share. But that's my opinion. And then I had someone right when the allegations had come out, there was a lot of men and a lot of older women, from what I was reading, that were upset that they were sharing their stories now, because the narrative is like it is in many other cases where it involves this type of assault. Why did they wait so long to talk about it? Why didn't they say it right away? The man is dead, right? And then I heard someone or read someone comment a man and say, well, Dolores Huerta would not have worked with him if this was true. And then lo and behold, the very next day, news comes out that Dolores Huerta says she was also a victim, actually had 2 children that are Cesar Chavez's. She gave them up for adoption. But she said the reason that she didn't want to come out and say it in the beginning is because she had co-founded this movement with him, right? The United Farm Workers movement and all this important, wonderful work they were doing. And she thought, he is such an icon in the community, and the work we're doing is so important and so necessary that if I say something to disgrace him, this is going to affect our entire fight, right? And so she stayed quiet. And so it enrages me when anybody questions victims' stories, because I am myself a survivor of sexual assault. you don't understand the pressure, right? Unless you're a survivor of that, the pressure of cultural pressure, family dynamics, for the same reasons that you were just talking about, Steve, a little while ago, like the taboo conversations about coming out and saying I was assaulted and now you're the slut. You somehow caused this, right? Even though you were a child. So for many, many reasons, victims stay quiet because sometimes within our own families, you don't find the support or the safe space to open up and say, this happened to me. And then you kind of blame yourself. Like, what could I have done differently? This is my fault. I probably did something wrong, right? So I was already enraged by the whole thing. But when I was listening to this and I was reading about all the allegations that were coming forward, which, by the way, this is a news story that the New York Times, correct? The New York Times broke. And it appears that it was an investigation that lasted several years. They didn't just spend a few weeks or months into this. I believe it was over the course of 5 years that they dug up whatever they could, started to corroborate stories, with victims that they're still living. They did a really thorough investigation. And that's why they were able to come out and say, we know that this is true. This is what's happened based on the stuff that we've been able to fact check and corroborate, right? But then as I started reading, because again, it kind of caused a lot of chaos within our community because of the person that Cesar Chavez is and what he represented for so many of us for a long time. But I had already had really complex opinions about Cesar Chavez. I think I may have shared with you, Aldo. But again, I know that the work he did was important, right? So I couldn't deny that. He was a part of a really important movement. But then I started to dig up and I find out, I didn't know this, that back in the 70s, he was a part of basically a cult that was created. What was his name? I have it here. I might have noted it down. The name of the group, which was presented as like a rehabilitation center, that's what it was branded as. But in the end, it turned out to be a horrible cult, right? Synanon, there you go. And it was created in the late 50s by a guy named Charles Theroux. And it was supposed to, again, presented as a drug rehabilitation program. But this cult, Cesar Chavez becomes a part of it. And he kind of becomes enamored with the founder of this cult, his very aggressive take on trying to basically dominate people, right, and control them. So much so that some of the tactics that he learned in this cult, he takes and he sort of applies them at La Paz, which is the headquarters for where all his activism basically happened and Cesar Chavez lived. And the people that were working with him would participate often in weekly meetings where the whole point, I think it was called the game. This was like a social behavior technique to control people. They would choose a person who would go in the center, and then everybody, using the worst of the worst, just profanity galore, would start to critique the person. And it was a way to break them down. And this was so popular that up to 100 people would participate in these weekly meetings. And so as I start reading more about this, I start to realize Cesar Chavez, of course, was human. He was flawed. And I think where a lot of times we go wrong as a community is that we want to bring out one hero from a movement. And they picked Cesar because a lot of people say that he was very charismatic. He knew how to draw a crowd. People would follow him, right? But I think it's safe to say that he was a little bit full of himself and he really needed that validation from people. So, of course, this leadership position, it fit like a glove for him, right? And he took on so well. And so the reason I bring all of this up is because I feel there is a little bit of what we've been talking about in that maybe there was a need for him as a man growing up, like you said, victim of consumerism, maybe feeling like he didn't have enough, meeting someone along the way who gave him this toxic masculinity message about what it means to be a true leader. And then when you give someone like that any kind of power, they almost always are going to abuse it.
I was just thinking, when this all broke and everything, well, let me back up a little. I've always had some issues with Cesar Chavez, and it's a position I've had for many, many years. And my issues with Cesar Chavez was his attitude towards Mexican nationals, undocumented Mexican workers. And I've said this many times before, that I acknowledged his participation in this movement and acknowledged that he did some things and he was instrumental in the United Farm Workers movement. However, the thing that's always kind of, stuck in my craw or whatever was his attitude towards Mexican nationals. I mean, he did some things, like he used some very derogatory language. At one point, he had union members out kind of patrolling the border and things like that. They called it the wet line. And so I've said this before, our entire podcast, everything I do, whether I'm writing for Fronterizo News or El Paso Herald Post, is premised in the basic understanding that Mexican Americans and Mexican nationals, we're one community. I know we're not monolithic, and there are variations and regional variations, but any movement or any political position that doesn't understand and acknowledge this commonality is invalid in my opinion. So I always had that resentment or reservation about Cesar Chavez. Now, moving on to these troubling allegations about him, I just thought that, for once, I think we need to believe the women, because you're right. There's a pattern where whenever something like this happens, it's the women who are suddenly suspect, the victims who are suddenly suspect. And so for me, it was just a time to, I believe them, and I believe the allegations, and I just think as a man, it's time for me to listen and learn and understand that we're going to break that pattern of always attacking the victims of abuse. And so right out of the gate, I had no problem believing Dolores Huerta and believing the other victims. I don't think the New York Times, I think they took their time. It wasn't something that happened. And this is New York Times. I'm not saying they're infallible, but they took their time. They wouldn't have gone to press with something that they couldn't validate. And so there's a dynamic that, with victims that I don't fully understand. So it's really not, and this is my advice to other men, you don't know what's going on. You don't understand the dynamics. So maybe you need to sit back and allow yourself to learn and listen. And instead of, I've noticed there was a lot of backlash and, why is she coming out now? I don't know, but we don't understand the dynamics of what occurred. And so for me, it was a time to sort of listen and basically credit and validate the victim's version of what occurred.
I come from a different point than Aldo. I remember I grew up in two countries, Mexico and the United States. Two states, Chihuahua and California. Specifically in the Valley in California, along 99 and Modesto, California. So it's the heart of the Valley. And so Cesar Chavez obviously was mentioned. The movement was mentioned. I participated in marches. And the reason it was so dear to us was when you live in Modesto, California, right? When me growing up in Modesto, California, I remember being in the third grade and I was the only Mexican kid in the third grade. There was a point where I even thought I was white, right? I'm like, well, I must be white, because everyone was white. And so even though, it's funny, but that's the way you grow up. And then you realize, no, I'm not white, right? I'm Mexican. And then you realize that the idea of being Mexican in California, in the Valley, is one you're going to take up the role of the oppressed, right? You are a strawberry picker. You work in the fields, right? You're a janitor. There is no such thing as a Mexican doctor or a Mexican lawyer or scientist. None of that, right? You guys are all have strong backs and you should be out in the field. So that's the story. That's what you live with. And so when you have someone like they teach you about Cesar Chavez, who defied that, who fought that, right? And no one deep inside your heart, and me coming from two countries, I knew that was wrong. In Chihuahua, there's doctors, there's politicians, there's presidents, they're all Mexican, right? California was like, no, those are all, they're going to be working in the field. So I knew there was something, a big type disconnect, something wrong. But the people that were my friends that lived with, that lived down the street, that I went to school with, that were Mexicanos, Mexicans, we saw in Cesar Chavez as a person who defied that, who was willing to take all that head on and say, look, I'm willing to fight this. And the way he fought it, you have to kind of give credit to his organizing efforts, right? Much, if you look at civil rights movements and you look at King, Martin Luther King Jr., how he fought, they were well organized, but they believed in equality, right? They believed that what you were doing, that all men were created equal and all women were created equal. And if you didn't believe that, then you were against God, right? That wasn't being, it was against the Creator. Cesar Chavez is the same with the Catholics, right? I mean, the fact that people were marching from, let's say, Fresno all the way to Sacramento, right? They didn't call them a march. They called them a peregrinación, right? It was a pilgrimage, right? They had el estandarte de la Guadalupe, de la Virgen de Guadalupe, right? I mean, it was very religious, right? And it was about being, it was about God and God having this the sense that we were all equal and that racism, abuse was wrong, right? I mean, that was the narrative. That was what we were fighting for. And so what happens when you learn that Cesar Chavez was doing, what he was doing? It's very unfortunate. I mean, it's like, oh my God, that was my hero, right? And he's done these terrible things, and it leaves a void. And it's like, well, I'm looking for another hero. Well, ya no hay. Dolores Huerta, right? And respect for Dolores Huerta and her movement, but then that's it. Who else? So I mean, there's some history, some guys that are like really into Chicano history can give you a list of people, right? And respect for that. But for most of us, I think that we're left with thinking, okay, well, who else? Dolores Huerta and who else? And that's it, right? And so it's a big blow. It's a big blow. Now, I'm not justifying what he did, and I'm not saying what he did was right. I mean, the man's dead. Does he have the opportunity to defend himself while he's dead? Right? I don't know. Did he do it? I believe Dolores Huerta. I don't see why Dolores Huerta would lie. But we don't know his story because he's dead. We know the story told by Dolores Huerta, right? And again, what he did is wrong and is terrible. And it's here in California. Obviously, the legislators moved very quickly. The Latino caucus, which I work with very closely, moved very closely. I mean, very, very rapidly, very fast to change the Cesar Chavez Memorial Day to the farm workers. They're moving really fast to erase his name. Can you erase the legacy? Can you erase the movement? I don't think you want to do that, but at the same time, are we trying to correct something that we know is wrong? Yes. Now, I'm gonna take a shot because I can. What are we doing about Trump? Pedophile. He's a convicted felon. I mean, and yet he puts everyone in danger, and yet he's still the president of the United States. Keeps on doing whatever he wants to do, and it's like, okay, well, o todos rabones o todos coludos, right? It's like, come on, now we have to be.
Yeah, it's true, and this came out right before a lot of celebrations throughout, especially Texas, California, New Mexico, where, Cesar Chavez was going to be remembered, right? All these in the community centers and celebrations and whatever, right? Was going to have, and then they broke the story right before that happened. So it was days. It took days for everyone to unify and be like, this isn't okay. Even the United Farm Workers were like, hey, we don't feel right, essentially, doing anything at the moment. We're just kind of gonna like take a step back. Like Aldo said, listen and let the victims, because it was multiple victims that have come forward. The one who is the most known is Dolores Huerta, because she co-founded this with Cesar Chavez. But it was multiple victims who were daughters of people who marched with him and worked with him, right? So it was multiple
and who
victims.
were minors at the time, by the two minors.
Yes, minors at the time, yes. And so it was days. I'm very proud of the fact that everybody in our community, Mexican and Mexican Americans specifically, all the Chicanos gathered and said, nope, we're not going to celebrate a person who potentially allegedly did all these awful things, right? Even, I wanted to laugh when this happened, even Abbott was like, I don't even know what it is he did, but he canceled something or changed the name, something. It was so ridiculous to me. I'm glad he did it, but for the same reason that you were just saying now, Steve, like the hypocrisy of like, I'm going to unify with the victims right now. And Texas is now going to come on, remember this person. But we have the president of the United States, who is very much a pedophile and a predator and a liar and a cheat and just all the most awful things.
The worst of the worst.
The worst of the worst, right? And they're not doing anything about that. So I think there was a lot of people saying that, like, we are proud of the Mexican American community for taking swift action, doing what they felt was the right thing, making space for the victims, right? And then we still have this whole administration that's full of predators, so many of them, right? And it's just not, it's so unfair. It's so unfair. But also I wanted to make a point to something else you were saying, Steve. I do think that multiple things can exist at once, all together. I don't think that the movement should take a hit for this one person that did something, right? And I know that a lot of people say, oh, well, like he was a man, he was human, people make errors, right? But then when you have that kind of title weighing on you, right? The leader, like you said, he was representation for so many, right? And the work he did and that he took a part of was important. That is true. But it's also true that we should not recognize this man who caused so much harm, right? But I guess the question is, or what we should focus on is, yes, the movement, the activism should not take a fall for something that one person did. I absolutely agree with that.
And I agree, Julie. I mean, I agree, and I totally agree with that. But just think about this, though. Let's just think about the civil rights movement, and think, what if King was a player, a cheater?
And there was something he did.
Yeah,
exactly. There is. That's my point. There is, right? There is, and yet
that's another podcast.
Right, that's another podcast, right? I mean, we still keep on celebrating that. Yeah, MLK Day. I mean, you think about that, right? I mean, that the man embodies the civil rights movement, right? But yet we know he was cheating on his wife, right? We know he was doing all these bad things, right? We know he engaged in plagiarism, but at the same time, like you said, I mean, we also acknowledge what he did, right? And that he was part of the movement, and he embodied the movement, and he provided direction, inspiration, motivation, all those good things that we need for a movement, hope, right? And he was able, in a very poetic way, to communicate that message, just like what Chavez did, right? And I think we did the right thing, but at the same time, I kind of like, well, but King did it, and then Trump, and Ronald Reagan, and I mean all these other guys, and I don't know. I'm conflicted at times.
This is why we never have to idolize one person, because it does impact the community that they represent, you know? And then sadly, people outside of the community will sometimes or often use that as a weapon to be like, well, you know, look at what this person did, and we can't expect anything positive from this movement because this person did X, Y, and Z, right? So I think the message should be that, like, we have to remember that we are human. Again, I'm not condoning anything that Cesar Chavez did. I feel for his victims. My heart goes out to them. I too agree that it was a good thing that they sort of took swift action and everybody united and they did the things they did. But I think that I am very firm in that. One, because I am a part of the community and I feel that my voice matters when it comes to this. And so I'm like, as a member of this community, I'm glad that this is what happened, and we meant business and we did it, right? Second, again, as a former survivor, like, I would very much want to see this type of justice happen every single time that someone opens up and comes forward and courageously shares their experience, right? Second, justice for them. But then when we talk about like King and other people that have been in positions of power and authority, that have become iconic to their communities, I have my thoughts around it, but I guess I feel because I'm not an actual member of that community, like maybe I just don't really have anything. I mean, obviously I have an opinion and I have something to say, but it's almost like, pues en su casa cada quien se encarga de sus cosas, right? And so, but I know those things have happened. They're still happening with the sitting president. It is frustrating, and I'm angered that nobody does anything, because this is the highest authority in the nation. And he is accused, and there is proof of just awful things that he participated in, that he committed, and nothing's being done, right? And so, yeah, there's that. It's just, yeah. How do we go from here? What do we do?
Yeah, and I think you said something that is very true. You know, all these things somehow coexist, right? They kind of run parallel to each other. At what point do they intersect? I don't know, right? I mean, right now I can tell you about with Cesar Chavez, I'm very conflicted, right? Because I do believe that the movement, not the person, but the movement, has changed the political reality of California, right? At least in California. And I live it every single day that I walk into that Capitol, when I'm sitting at these hearings, when I am following the politics of California, when I know that the leader of the assembly is Mexican American and his name is Robert Rivas, that the leader of the Senate is Monique Limon, right? Both of them very, very supportive of the Mexican American and Latino and immigrant communities of California. When I see that, I mean, it's just very good. There's a lot of pride and good feelings to see that happening, and it's wonderful to see all those things happening, right? And but at the same time, I know that both Rivas was a big follower of Cesar Chavez, but he was also a big follower of Dolores Huerta, Monique Limon as well, and I know it's created, it's painful, and it creates a conflict, but they coexist. Where they intersect, I don't know. And eventually we'll find a place where these two things that run almost parallel to each other will eventually meet, and we'll reach some type of resolution.
Yeah, I kind of agree with kind of, I think both of you are saying this. You need to make a distinction between Cesar Chavez, an integral element of the movement, undoubtedly, but there's also the movement. I mean, and the term movement entails there's many people who are involved with this. Maybe people who didn't achieve the prominence that Cesar Chavez did. And so I think it's important to distinguish Cesar Chavez from the movement. And so that's how I'm kind of reconciling everything at this point. Like I said, I've always had reservations about Cesar Chavez, but I do acknowledge that, he did some important things, but it's not just Cesar Chavez who did this. It was the movement.
Right. Yeah.
And
Like,
that movement is still important. I'm proud of how our community responded to this situation. I know even before the news broke, several Cesar Chavez parades were canceled in San Antonio, Corpus Christi, and other places. As far as Abbott and other Republicans jumping in on this, oh well, I'm sure they were happy to cancel Cesar
right.
Chavez Day, and they're happy about this,
And not because it was the right thing to do or it
and
felt
not
like the
because
right
it was
thing to do.
right. We need to understand that these people have been very antagonistic to Mexican Americans. Whether all Mexican Americans realize this, that's a
That's
different
story.
topic, maybe a different podcast, whatever. But I am proud of how our community responded. I believe Dolores Huerta and the victims unequivocally. And I think we just need to, stop blaming the victims. And, we're going to do what we're going to do. And the other side's going to not do what they should do. Not surprised anymore. I mean, they've shown us who they are. It's time we started to believe who they are and stop holding them to a standard that, they're not going to ever attain. And, we need
they're
to just
not.
understand who they are.
Yeah, they're not. And I want to share something really quickly so we can sort of maybe, I don't know, I don't think us three here in our little space are going to come up with the solution to to ending this toxic masculinity that's being, talked about or whatever, but just to sort of bring it back to why, as Aldo mentioned earlier, we have to pay attention as parents, as mentors, as friends, just anybody that if you are around young people in your life, both men and women, how can we contribute to stop that or maybe create these minds that don't accept, help shape these minds that don't accept this type of messaging? First of all, like Aldo said, understand that it is absolutely getting to our children. It's getting to our people in our community, even though a lot of these influencers that we saw on the documentary Inside the Manosphere they weren't Latino. None of them were Mexican American or Latino, but it is getting to our communities. There's been a lot of conversations around that. And I actually saw a content creator from Mexico who was like, we have to pay attention. We have to talk to the young men in our lives, because a young man who had been consuming this type of content in Mexico ended up, I don't know if I can say it on YouTube. I'm sure I can, but killing, I was going to say unalive, but we'll see what they say. Two female teachers.
Yes, I heard about that. Yes. Very tragic incident. Yeah.
Very, very tragic. And it was a direct consequence of this young man consuming this content. And so it is in our homes. It's right there. And other than staying vigilant, I don't know, like, how do we protect young men in our community as well as young women? Like, what can we do?
Yeah. No, I think first and foremost, we need to confront it. And, I, for one, am guilty of kind of dismissing it as this ridiculous, can I say shit on, sorry, can I curse on this? Yeah, just ridiculous, almost comical, but there's some very serious consequences, as, that one incident you described demonstrates. What I find interesting is that in this particular case, I think most of the people that they featured on the documentary were people of color, if I'm not mistaken. I think two of them were white, but one was half black. Another one was a Sudanese Arab. Another one was, Sneeko was a Filipino. And I think these guys are, they're playing with sort of fascist ideology here that I don't think they understand. They're playing with a fire, but they can't. If this ever turns on them, they ever find themselves in the crosshairs, they're in for a surprise, because I think they're dealing with an ideology that they don't fully understand. And that's what leads them into, this anti-Semitic discourse. And I spend a lot of time, like I've said before, in some of the darker spaces of the internet, kind of watching the other side and what it really is. And I'm surprised that they're so tolerant of somebody who's half black, a Sudanese Arab, and a Filipino. Of the 5 people featured on that documentary, 3 of them, I guess, were not Aryan, right? And so I would just caution these people to be very careful with be careful what you wish for. That's all I'm going to say, because these people can turn on you in a dime.
They're being used to push this ideology, the narratives. They're like boots on the ground, right? But I think we might have mentioned it on you guys' podcast when I was a guest, like this idea, especially when it comes to people of color, that by uniting with this side, right, with this rhetoric and helping to push it, that somehow we're going to be the exception to the rule somehow. But we are not. We are not. That we are, when we participate in these things and we help push it out, we are just being their little nice, good, obedient bee workers who, once they have no need for any of that, will be tossed. And I think that's the thing that they don't understand still.
Right. Same thing with Brandon Herrera. I mean, Brandon, you're sitting here kind of spouting this anti-Semitic discourse, kind of repeating a lot of this white supremacist rhetoric. Be careful, my friend. I still don't understand how the dynamics of that works. I mean, you're Brandon Herrera. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think he's ever admitted it, but he's Mexican American. I think his family is from San Antonio. He went to North Carolina or someplace like that. I still don't understand the dynamics I think there's some ideological contradiction there that, he's spouting white supremacists. I'm going, you really can't be a Nazi. Sorry. Just by definition, you can't be a Nazi. And I don't think your family was ever involved in fighting the Civil War that I'm aware of. It would be strange. It'd be a historical. It'd be historically remarkable if his family was somehow involved in that. But the Nazis had a term for people like this, capo with a K. So they had certain Jewish people who helped guard some of the camps and did other things. They were useful idiots, basically, and that's what these people are. They're selling an ideology that, at its core, is antithetical to who they are. At the end of the day, you have a Sudanese Arab. Be careful, because there are things in Europe right now, and if you are in Europe or wherever the heck you are, watch out, because this stuff is flaring up and it could come after you just as quickly.
And just to add to what Mena said, right? I mean, you got names for these people, right? And remember, we got a name too, as Mexican Americans, Mexicanos. A Malinche, right? I mean, that's the word we use. Don't be a Malinchista, right? That's don't be a sellout, right? Don't be a sellout. Don't be a sellout, right? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, don't be a sellout, right?
Yep.
But that's the truth. I mean, we understand. Yeah. Don't sell out your people, right? And if you do, there's consequences. Right. And history has taught us that, right? History has taught us that, and so we have to be very vigilant about that. And I do hope that these words that we are all discussing in this conversation resonates with those that don't get it, and somehow we bring light to their life, and then they see the light and understand, okay, I'm totally wrong. I'm going to stop supporting Trump. I'm going to do my best to go out and vote for Democrats, and don't listen to this bullcrap about manosphere and all this other stuff. And seek out, it's pretty simple. Seek out happiness in your life, and an easy way of doing that is just wishing well to your neighbor, doing the right thing. You know what the right thing is. Our values are pretty much the same, right? We know what's right and what's wrong, and just doing those simple things I think that's the way that we can accomplish way more things. We
Yeah.
can increase the
And confront the
quality of
people
our
that need
life.
to be confronted
Yeah,
as well, though. I
exactly.
mean, one
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
is,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a time and a place to be polite and love your neighbor, I guess, but it's also important to confront people that need to be confronted, movements that need to be confronted,
Yeah.
I agree.
politicians that
I
need to
think
be
it's,
confronted,
you
ideologies that need
you
to be confronted.
you confront those issues head on. You don't tiptoe around them, right? You don't tiptoe. You
Right.
don't sugarcoat them.
Exactly.
You confront
Yeah.
them head on, right?
I just wanted to give a shout out to an event that's being organized by El Chuco Avla on May 5th at San Jacinto Plaza. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. And I guess this event is being called, and there's going to be public speakers. I might even be a speaker. I'm not sure yet. Maybe I'm gonna talk to them. I'm not one of the organizers. I follow this organization. They do a lot of really interesting things. It's being called the Day of Struggle Against Imperialism, 1862 and 2026. And so, speaking of confronting people, the focus of this event will be to protest Trump's threats against Mexico, which have been occurring for quite some time now. Threats to engage in unilateral military action, these accusations that have been leveled against President Claudia Sheinbaum. And a lot of people are just fed up with this. And so this event is sort of designed to denounce the coalition of right-wing governments in Latin America who have aligned with the Trump administration against Mexico under the rubric of an initiative. I think they're calling it the Shield of the Americas. So in addition to the United States and the Trump administration, the countries that are participating in this security initiative are Argentina, the Bahamas, Belize, Bolivia, Chile, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Guyana, Honduras, Jamaica, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, and Trinidad and Tobago. And so I guess at the Shield of the Americas Summit, which was held in a suburb of Miami, crawling with Venezuelans, by the way. Doral is crawling with Venezuelans, Venezuelan Americans. I think I've talked about this before. Trump singled out Mexico as a source of cartel violence and noted President Claudia Sheinbaum's refusal to allow the U.S. strikes on targets in Mexico. And she's been steadfast in rejecting all of this. And so this is an opportunity for us to finally come out and condemn the rhetoric. I mean, this should have happened a long time ago. Probably not the friendliest thing, but it's time we acknowledge that we have enemies even within Latin America, and we're going to stop tolerating all of this rhetoric. And so this should be a very interesting event. A lot of people, they espouse being polite, and I think that's fine. But at some point, you must confront things directly, and I think
Yeah,
that
because
this is
there's
a
a time
step
for
in the right
everything.
direction. Yeah.
Yeah, there is because even if you think about it, even to be able to achieve that happiness, that peace of mind, that unity, you have to confront these things and you have to put an end to it and you have to pull it from the root. So in order for us to even achieve that, we have to be able to use our voices, our platforms, whatever's at our disposal to fight against it.
I'd love to sit, back and analyze what's driving this hostility, because it also comes from Cuban Americans and Venezuelan Americans and Venezuelans and Cubans in the United States. And for a long time, I've kind of rejected the notion of this pan-Latino unity. And lately, it's, this is demonstrating that, you're willing to side with the Trump administration against Mexico. And, for many Mexican Americans, any act against Mexico, we will construe as an act against Mexican Americans.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think the majority of people that, who are going to show up to this event are Mexican Americans. And so we're fed up with the rhetoric for, I don't know what causes it or what's at the root of it. All I know is we're going to stand up against it and start speaking out. And I've written about this before. I think one of the articles I published on Fronterizo was the myth of pan-Latino unity. And I sort of have rejected that notion for quite some time now. Here's Exhibit A, Your Honor. You know, it
Yeah.
happened in Doral, which is a suburb of Miami, for a reason. This is
Yeah.
where some of Trump's biggest supporters happen to live. I think the Venezuelan community and Venezuelan American community, I think they might even be voting for Trump in higher numbers than the Cuban American community. We're really just focused on the situation in
In
Mexico,
Mexico, right.
and that's kind of who we care about.
We know our people, we know the mentality, and we know that we really are a united front when it comes to that. And it's something that the majority of us are not okay with and we don't
Right.
stand with.
Yeah. We will, not many of us will not tolerate
Yeah.
any type of, I mean, as you can see, it's going to be an interesting event. So I just like, to invite anybody who happens to be
Listening, yeah.
available to go check this out, to go check it out. And I'm very pleased that somebody's doing something like this.
Well, I mean, the only thing I want to add, and again, I wish I was in El Paso to participate in
I
that.
know.
But I'm not. So, but one thing I do want to, I guess, put it out there for all of us to know. At the federal level, Trump is trying to uh, to take away one sacred right that all American citizens have, and that is the right to vote. Right? The SAVE Act, if you guys have heard of it, it's just one
Oh, yeah.
way of suppressing the vote. Let's be aware of
Mhm.
it. Not only that, here in California, it's incredible to hear that the far right has been able to get enough signatures to put a initiative on the ballot in these upcoming elections, which is the voter initiative, right? Which would do basically what the SAVE Act is trying to do at the federal level, which is to suppress the voting of the people by asking them to, present a real ID when you vote, or your birth certificate when you vote, bullshit like that. Like, no, we don't have to do that, right? I mean, and because, first of all, we don't have to do that because there is no voter fraud to begin with, right? And so, but it's one way, I think, for Trump, because he's made this a priority of his, right? And here in California, it's surprising now that that we're in that situation. But it's alarming, right? And I think what we need to do is get the word out, make sure that we don't tolerate this bullshit, and that it's almost 60 years. Since it's the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. So let's make sure we keep that. That is power. We know that it's
Yes.
power because we need to get our people to vote, first of all, because that's what we failed to do. But if
Yes.
we get our people to vote, um, hey, look, we have the numbers. We have the numbers. One thing that I've talked to Aldo about is what happened in California. When all these when ICE was there first in LA, and then you had the protest, the violent protest. I think Trump, because obviously this is typical of Trump, he miscalculated California. He thought, oh, I go on there and then we'll flip it red, right? But I don't think he understood the culture of the people, the population, the current population in California. 40% is Latino. Students, 55% of the student population in in California is Latino, Mexican American, most of them, right? So we're deeply rooted in the state, and I think that's why we're leading the resistance, because we just are not willing to surrender, and we're not, or it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. And I'm glad that we're doing something in Texas, and I'm happy that we're doing something in El Paso, and we're bringing light to this issue, and we're confronting the issue head on, and we're not tiptoeing around it, and we're not trying to sugarcoat it. Let's just call it out and say what it is, right? It's freaking racism, right? That's what it is. It's
Yeah.
they're trying to suppress us. So ponte las pilas, and
Por favor.
like Mena used to say, wake up and smell the frijoles.
No, I never said that. I
I
don't
love
remember saying
You
that.
that.
never said that. He
I
said,
don't think I ever
wake
said
up and
that. No,
smell the
really, I
frijoles.
don't,
Yeah.
don't think
Well,
I
that's
don't
where I
think I ever
learned it
said
from.
that.
I
Yeah.
learned it from
Oh
my good
my
friend
gosh, I'm
Aldo
gonna
here.
steal that.
No.
That's a good one. Then wake up and smell
Wake
the
up and smell
frijoles,
the frijoles.
people.
And smell the frijoles, right? My point is, that's the only way. We need to call it out. If you're not going to call it out,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
might as well just,
There's
surrender,
Stand
there's
in
a
the way.
throw in the towel.
yeah. Yeah.
No, yeah, if you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to get involved, don't stand in the way. Don't participate with your vote if you're just gonna go along with like whatever's
Yes.
gonna harm us. Just
Yeah.
don't get in the way. Let other people use their voice. Let other people fight. Organize, because
Yeah.
that's a big one. Organizing. I think organizing is what makes this happen, right? And we do need to focus on that. We need to get better at organizing.
When talking about Texas and California share very similar demographics, by the way, right? They share
Yeah,
very similar demographics. And so
Wildly
we need to
different,
push a
but
little.
similar demographics. But yes, very different. We have
Right,
lots of
redo,
work to
right,
do
right.
in
Like,
yeah,
Texas.
yeah, Mexican
That's
Americans are,
another
the
podcast. Got
largest,
three or
yeah,
four
largest
podcast episodes
minority,
going here.
majority,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
Yep.
it is
yeah.
true, and I think what Aldo's doing and what you're doing, Julie, and everyone else that's participating in this and learning how to organize and learning how to speak up, and speaking out and confronting the reality that we have to deal with. I think that's the way to go about it, and I really congratulate you, Julie, for your podcast, and of course,
Oh, thank you.
Aldo for doing what he's doing and speaking up and always writing, and just confronting this terrible monster, right? That we have to somehow put
Yeah,
down.
being such a present voice and a loud voice. Have noticed that since I've come in contact with Aldo. Definitely speaking up and knowing when to call it out in the right tone too, right? Because like you said, sometimes it does call for us to be patient and listen and try to have dialogue, but then there are other times where it's like, okay, I don't have time for that right now. I'm just going to tell you this is not right. Period, right? Full stop. So I'm really excited that you guys got to make it as my guest on the podcast. Before I let you go, because I've taken so much of your time, I tend to do this with all my guests. I try so hard, but then we get to talking and I just don't want to stop. But before I let you go, if we can start with Aldo, if you can let us know where we can find you, where people can find your work. Also, of course, your podcast and whatever you want to share with us.
Well, I'm the editor of fronterizonews.com. So if you go to fronterizonews.com, you'll see a lot of the editorials. I'm not the only writer on that particular site. There's also Martin Paredes, who is kind of a veteran guerrilla journalist in the El Paso area. It's amazing what he does. I also am a regular contributor to the El Paso Herald Post and El Paso News. So if you just go to El Paso News or ElPasoHeraldPost.com, you can find not only stuff I write, but what Martin and other local writers are sort of submitting. And as far as the Vanguard Elements podcast is concerned, you can just go to Apple Podcasts, I guess, and you should just look up Vanguard Elements, and you should be able to pull that up. I'm also on Twitter with Solidarity WMEX at that's my handle at X or Twitter or whatever it's called now.
The little bluebird or former little bluebird.
Right now it's X. I get. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And you, Steve, where can people find you if you want to be found?
Well, I mean, yeah, no, I don't have the infrastructure, the platforms that you guys have. I started a Substack account, and I'm barely kind of learning the ropes there. So I mean, if you guys want to look me up, there, but I don't have much content on there. Of course, I collaborate. Yeah, I collaborate with Aldo on Vanguard Elements, so follow that. But I would say that if you do have, I mean, most of my time I spend kind of buried in policy right now because of what's going on. There's the session right now in California. It's very important. Um, but I will say that if you guys want to follow, what's going on in policy and what's happening throughout the country, I would definitely recommend that you visit unidosUS.org, right? And learn. We got all kinds of resources, research, you name it. It's just incredible the information that's out there that we've been able to compile. Just some great stuff. And we keep it up. It's updated. Just great work. And also, I would recommend another site, which is the UCLA's ALPPI, which stands for the Latino Policy and Politics Institute. Those guys do some amazing research as well. It's important that when we do talk about the issues, when we do share our stories, that we combine them with facts, right? And these guys are incredible fact finders, and the way they analyze what's out there really kind of broadens your way of looking at the issues and understanding the root causes of the issues, which is important to find a solution to these issues, right? So great resources. So I don't know if you want to follow me. I don't have all that, but these two sources that I just mentioned, unidosus.org and UCLA's Latino Policy and Politics Institute, are just some amazing resources.
Sounds good. Well, no, yeah, I'm going to follow you, Steve, because don't feel bad. I haven't built my Substack at all either. So many things that I have to do, and I'm just like, I'm at the point where I'm barely following people, and then I'll start building something. But again, thank you both so much. This was great. I really do look forward to collaborating again because I seem to have sort of really a lot of the things that you guys have shared from your podcast, my time as a guest, and also now, so much of what I've been sort of just kind of brainstorming about and thinking and trying to figure out were things that were brought up, since I've connected with you guys. And so I think we have to stick together. We have to definitely be with like-minded individuals in these times specifically so that we can pull others, right? Organize, pull others, offer resources like Steve was just doing, and just put our nuestro granito de arena, right? Because this is rough and we have a lot of fight to still go for.
Yes. And Julie, before we wrap things up, I just wanted to say I'm so glad you're doing your podcast again. And, if we inspired you in any way to do that, then we're very proud of that. And we are at your service, Julie. Anything you need, if you just want to kind of run things by us, we are at your service. And good luck with everything. Like you said, let's keep in touch.
Let's what was it? Let's wake up and smell the frijoles, people.
I never I don't recall saying that, but okay.
He's a what?
Not bad.
Yeah, you said that, Aldo. And it's not deep fake. It's not fake news.
It's not fake news. Steve, Aldo, thank you so much. You guys really did inspire me to get back behind the mic and make this happen. So thank you both for that. And we'll catch you guys on another episode soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Julie.